Violation of dress code accusations often result in malicious compliance. We'll get into that story in just a bit, but first, you want me to go home? Okay. I worked at a restaurant. We had a front salad bar, a buffet with a salad bar, as well as things like a juice bar, an ice cream counter, and a small alcohol room at the bar. It was so popular and also a bit expensive, but somehow so underpaid, understaffed, and poorly managed. Jenny is the daughter and the only child of the owners of the restaurant. She's extremely spoiled. She almost always gets her way, and she has a temper where she'll get ticked off and just lay into the person for an hour straight. She used to come in screaming at everyone for nothing and made racist or nasty jokes. She'd pushed people to come in sick, then ask why they were so slow. Just the typical manager from heck. Marco, one of the kitchen managers, is the son of a family friend and a beloved member of the community. His management consisted of micromanaging, criticizing our work, blaming random people for things, giving extreme time constraints for tasks, encouraging everyone to smile, and going around asking people, while they're in the middle of working their 3 jobs, when they wanted to come in the next day or if they'd like to cover a shift on Saturday or whatever. He would forget to do things, then blame other people. Then he would go around criticizing people for their time management or responsibility. Anytime we reported that something was broken or something wasn't working, he just told us to figure it out and nothing would be done about it until Jenny came in screaming at everyone and narrowed it down to Marco. We had other managers coming in and out. They couldn't take it. There were people who were suddenly hired to take on big positions despite having no idea what they were doing, or joined with less than a full day of training just because the place was desperate. The waitresses were paid less than $4 an hour, and some of them were doing part of the dishwasher's duties, front manager duties, cleaning jobs, including kitchen and employee bathroom. I want to say dishwashing was the worst, as 3 different people would come to work drunk or high every day just to tolerate everything. My coworker DJ kept up even when other dishwashers weren't working, helped me or the waitress clean, and literally had to monitor food that was cooking, and he'd keep track of orders because the manager Marco and the chef wanted to mess around or go stand by the door and smoke. There were days where staff members would break down or get sick pulling a double shift, and he did everything for them. There was no choice. My job was preparing and filling food items for the main salad bar in front every day, and some days I also did salad bar in the buffet. I had other things to do as part of my normal salads buffet job, including making food for reservations, preparing and stocking the juice bar, and helping move stock into the freezers and fridge. On top of that, I was packing non-salad food for delivery and takeout, helping maintain and stock up to half the buffet, helping waitresses keep up with serving and bussing, doing ice cream and desserts, cleaning the whole kitchen and storage areas and customer bathrooms, helping the bar staff, helping at the front desk whenever I was out, and preparing ingredients or fetching things for the normal chef/buffet chefs, all for a little more than minimum wage. I fell every day because I was running on wet floors and I had a heat stroke and even had to go to the ER for injuries. On buffet days, I had a partner, but that didn't matter. She just stood around right in front of the manager, Marco, talking to her cousin who worked there while watching me work, and both she and Marco would take breaks every now and then to criticize my work or my speed. Everything was held together by DJ and me. We were teenagers on Rockstar drinks, so we took whatever was coming to us. We kept everything going so well that we got scheduled to work almost every day, then every weekend. Jenny gave us free soda privilege, and we got raises 2 times in 5 months, which were only 10 cents, but did look good to me because my dad praised all my paychecks. He didn't know what was going on and that I was working crazy hours, and he thought I was overpaid. Most of the customers were very sweet, so we tried our best to be of service, and a lot of them were regulars or people who came in to support Marco or everyone. There was always so much pressure on DJ and me. Also, DJ isn't white, and he would always get racist jokes and comments towards him. Marco and Jenny either did nothing or were the offenders. Most of the criticism, or Marco's projection, went to him, despite him doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing, and occasionally messing up due to extreme stress or time constraint. After a certain point, almost every criticism was race-based in some way. One horrible Saturday, there were 3 times as many reservations as usual, on top of all bars and buffet being open. I clocked in and found out one of the managers let go of DJ the afternoon before. Absolutely no one knew why, including DJ, and I'm really assuming it was Marco. I already had zero hope for the day, and the only thing fueling me was the customers and my paycheck, of course. In just the first hour, I passed Marco at least 5 times trying to get things done. There was one time we accidentally made eye contact while I was helping a waitress, but at some point I went to the freezer in the back to help load some ice cream in, and he happened to walk in at the same time that I was standing there for 3 seconds, doing nothing, waiting for my coworker to bring in the dolly. He gave me this frustrated look like, get back to work. He caught me maybe a half hour later while I was coming into the back of the kitchen, near the freezer, to mop up some spilled water. The final time he caught me, I was in the freezer again looking at the inventory to see what fruit we had enough of, because I could only serve what we had enough of in case people requested more, and Marco had enough. He said, quote, "The place is busy as freak, and you're in here just standing in the freezer for like 4 hours. Go home." I gave him this look like, what? And he reiterated that I was done for the night. I was not arguing with Marco. This was not my problem. I just said thanks, took my apron off, and headed out. Both the employee doors were blocked by trash cans, and my partner standing there with a whole cart of things talking to her cousin, so I went to use the main side door in the front of the restaurant. Jenny saw me and asked where I was going. I put on a smile and said, "Man, Marco is the best guy ever. He just randomly came up to me and told me to take the night off." Jenny's face went from confused to shocked to livid in the span of 1 second. She quickly told me, "Don't go just yet," and she stormed into the kitchen screaming, "Marco!" I pretended not to hear her over the music and customers, and I just turned around and left. I got over 10 phone calls, but I simply let my phone ring. I waited until my partner updated her Facebook status with "finally closed, girl night time," or something like that, and I finally texted Marco back and gave an apology that sucked up in the most condescending way, but in a way that was personal that only he would understand if he were to show it to someone. I came back the next morning and it was a complete disaster. Marco and Ginny came in looking dead tired because they spent the rest of the night and overtime busting butt, trying to keep things going. There were actually dishes and trash bags piled up, and both the buffet and kitchen were wrecked because Jenny and her dad didn't want to keep the workers late and pay them overtime. The restaurant had to close for the summer. They posted all these job opportunities in schools and on Facebook and eventually opened back up, but I never answered and DJ didn't accept amends, so it was a whole spiral. Because of me leaving and DJ being fired, they had to close down their ice cream and minimize their buffet, and they now close earlier because they can't handle it. There are less customers supporting Marco, and there were even customers saying they aren't coming back until Marco or Jenny leaves. There's a waitress who joined during my time there, and it was her first job ever. Now, she's the only previous employee left, and she ended up getting appointed as a manager at some point. I think they had to offer her a lot of money to stay because she bought a new house. Marco is the only other manager now. Marco is still asking me to come back, and since I deleted Facebook, I kept that phone number open with prepaid service on my old phone just for the purpose of reading his texts during my lunch. Okay, this is a lot of information, very long post, a lot to unpack, but what really stood out was chaos and $4 an hour. You lost me right there. Mr. Loisis Mithrax commented, "Ah yes, Dad's classic, you must be overpaid because your wages are way more than double what mine were when I was your age, so people must still survive off that, and if that was really that little, we would have raised minimum wage, and if I ever had to actually understand how little money that is, I'd have to accept my part in this system." Also, hey everybody, my name is Brendan, and if you guys enjoy these malicious compliance videos, it would be so amazing if you like the video or comment it down below if you're listening to our podcast. Now then, our next story is, okay, let's call the park officer. This happened July 4th weekend. I'm a member and have a place in a self-contained camp community. Nice quiet place with a lake and pools and a restaurant and things like that. I love it because my kid can be a kid like I was and go wander with friends and disappear until dinner time, and I don't have to worry. Our place is on a small cul-de-sac that's grassed in, and we use it for kids to play and set up cornhole and all that. Because it's July 4th, a bunch of people have guests, so the park is more full than normal, and a guest of someone on the circle parked at the edge of the grass. Well, my kid and another kid were playing catch, and one of the kids missed the ball and it hit the parked car. Owner of the car comes out hot and going at the kids. Me and the other kid's parent both go over to calm the situation. Obviously, if there's damage, we'll take care of it because it's from our kids. But this guy starts going off about all these dents and this big scratch and a crack in the windshield, and all this is the kid's fault. I was willing to be reasonable, but when you start saying you want a ton of extra work done trying to blame my kid, I get a little less reasonable. So we're going back and forth, and then he says the magic word that if we aren't willing to pay for everything, he's going to call the park safety office to come deal with it. Knowing where this is going, I smiled and said, yes, okay, let's do that. So the officer comes out, and to no one's surprise but this guy, the area his car is parked is a no parking area. So not only does the officer tell him to deal with it, because if he had followed the rules and parked in an actual parking zone, this wouldn't have happened. And because the guy told him he'd been parked there for more than 2 days with no issues before now, he got a nice fat ticket and order to move his car. He turned bright red but didn't say another word and moved his car, and we didn't see or hear him from the rest of the weekend. Ah yes, instant karma. You try to pull a little fraudulent pullover on these guys and you end up incriminating yourself and paying that ticket. That's what you get, fool. One user commented, I'm the same way, very reasonable when crap happens, till the opposing party isn't. Then we're done being nice and I'm not giving you an inch of ground. Good for you. Our next story is, we never have time to do it correct, but we always have time to do it again. Longtime listener, first-time caller. I ran the mail department in a good-sized commercial printing company. Most of my day was filled with taking customer mailing lists and processing them so that they get discounts at the post office. But occasionally I produced consecutively numbered items, read raffle tickets. Now, raffle tickets are small, maybe 1 by 4 inches, too small to run to the machine by themselves. We decided to run them 4 across and 2 high, so 8 raffle tickets per sheet. I created a spreadsheet in Excel that had 8 columns, 1 for each raffle ticket position. The raffle tickets in this particular case were printed on a special type of paper that has a holographic background. Very expensive. The process of setting up the inkjet machine to print the 8 numbers in 2 spots on each raffle ticket is to find the appropriate XY position for the first ticket number to be placed on the customer portion. Then copy that number to be replaced on the part of the ticket that's ripped off and given to the administrators of the raffle. Now I have coordinates that I can extrapolate to the remaining 7 positions. Having copied and pasted the original 2 text boxes using extrapolated XY coordinates, they were all showing the exact same raffle number, the first row/column in my spreadsheet. While I was going through the process of changing position 2 to reflect the data in the second column, position 3 to reflect the data in the third column, etc., my always-in-a-hurry manager showed up and said, right in front of my entire department, yelled, "Why is this machine not running yet?" I was currently halfway through updating the 5th out of 8 tickets. I told him that it wasn't set up yet. I still had some work to do to get it ready. He looked at the screen, and I could see that there was data for all 8 tickets. All 16 positions had a text box associated. Never mind if the text box contained the correct data or not. They all had data associated. Happy to tell you, I pushed back hard. I didn't give him specifics, just that the setup was not complete and cannot be run as is. He asked, I crap you not, what's it going to take to get this machine running right now? Easy. I'll simply comply. I handed him the last piece that came out of the machine. Mind you, position 6, 7, and 8 all contained data for position 1, and position 5 was only half right, and said, if you want to put your signature on this piece, we can run it right now, but I'm not signing off on it until I verify the accuracy of all 16 positions. The next day was heck. More special paper had to be purchased, delivered, FedEx overnight, first AM delivery, rush job to print and cut and deliver to my department, rush to imprint, correctly, positions 5 through 8, cut to final size, box and deliver to the customer. Job was late. We lost any profit we were looking forward to through overnight delivery, reprint, etc., etc., etc. I just smiled and did my job. Never said a word, but the look on his face when he told me I had to redo half the job was priceless. We see this quite often. Managers that think that they know more than the frontline workers. They usually don't, and this is just the latest case of that. outspoken idiot responded. An extra 10 to 20 minutes of number crunching on page layout for cut, fold, stack jobs could save hours in the bindery department, as our bindery manager found out when he wanted jobs to keep his staff busy. Couldn't understand why our organization section lads would talk with the printers and finishers to plan jobs around other workloads. Waiting an hour for a particular digital printer was sometimes worth it, knowing the finished product fed better through a perforation machine. Hours saved from manual mind-numbing labor by the guys in the origination department, sometimes it's worth being nice to those guys. Our next story is written account of everything. I worked for a large property management company many years ago. The property manager was a terrible person. He was cruel to residents, low-income housing, and ruled through fear and intimidation. He'd get in his employees' faces, swear at them, and generally try to get people to quit so he could fill positions with friends and minions. He was doing everything in his power to get me to quit. I hated going to work every day, but this was during the recession. I had a baby at home, so quitting was not an option. At one point, he told me I had to keep a detailed log of everything I did, all day long, broken down every 15 minutes. I knew he didn't think I would do this, but I also knew he'd likely wait months before asking for the documentation. I also knew that he assumed that he could fire me for insubordination if it was not done to his specifications. I was correct. He waited about 3 months and randomly asked me for the documentation. I told him to give me a minute and I'd print it out. When I returned with the full log, he and the assistant manager, who was in cahoots with him, just stared at it with dumbfounded and defeated looks on their faces. A couple of weeks later, I left that property and moved to another job within the company. A few months after that, he and the assistant manager got caught for fraud and stealing money. Payback's a bench, I guess. It always is. Payback is undefeated. Batting 1,000, baby. Imaginary Yak 6487 replied, I'm a PM for a low-income apartment complex. I've been doing this for 19 years, and I've never understood that type of manager's mentality. I did have a person I was training to be my assistant manager, and they had an attitude like this, looking down on residents. I told her that you don't know their story and why they're here. She says I could never live like this. I care too much about myself and family and don't take handouts. I said, that's all fine and good, until something bad happens and you find yourself needing housing. I told her I've been there twice in my life. It helped me get back on my feet after a divorce and after I lost my job, and that's how I got into this industry. Like I said, you don't know someone else's story. After that, she had her nose stuck up in the air and wasn't listening to me. I told her that she would not make it in this industry with that suck-butt attitude and acting like she was better than everyone else. Go work for some snobby place, 'cause this ain't it. Our next story is, when is lunch? I worked at night fixing machinery. Easy gig. When something broke, they would call me and I would fix it. Oddly, things refused to break on a schedule. Often, I would clock out for lunch just before the end of the shift, clock back in, then clock off and go home. For me, my lunch was flexible. If I was fixing something, with many people standing around not able to work, I fixed it. Occasionally, I had to warm my lunch in the microwave several times before I had time to eat it. Most nights were slow, and I could eat any time I wanted. Sometimes I'd get a call during lunch, and I'd go fix it. Somewhat awkward to keep looking at the clock, stop what I was doing to go clock back on. I was yelled at. I was told I had to take a full 30-minute lunch off the clock on schedule and couldn't work when I was off the clock. I mentioned that when I worked a different job at the same company years before, the truck stop down the road had great steak and eggs. Maybe they still do. Boss said I can't leave the property. I told him, 1, if I'm off the clock, you dang sure won't be seeing me because I won't be here. 2, in 10 years, I've never had a scheduled time for lunch. 3, you pick the 30 minutes during the night when absolutely nothing gets fixed because I'm off the clock and or gone. Never heard another word. Yeah, this is a classic mic drop moment. Nothing really else to say. You got 'em, owned 'em. Baulio commented, that's the old axiom. If you don't schedule equipment maintenance, the equipment will schedule the equipment maintenance. NOP replied to this, they did maintenance during the day when most of the plant was down, but during the night, when the equipment was actually being used, belts break, bearings seize up, wiring to sensors gets smacked, any number of things occurs. Most times I was there working alone. Some folks thought their job was to fix things. I believed my job was to make the machinery run until morning, usually fixing the problem, occasionally workarounds. Our next story is receptionist to office coordinator real quick. Worked as a front desk at a medium-sized company. I'd been there for 2 years now, and aside from answering phone calls, I quietly fixed tech issues, helped schedule meetings, proofread reports, whatever needed doing. Like I was doing more my job description because I love the people here. One day, our ex-manager, let's call him Derek, we're not close because he thinks too highly of himself, overheard me helping someone format a document and said, "Why are you doing that? You're just the receptionist. Stay in your lane." So I did. The rest of the week, I politely declined everything that wasn't listed in my original job description. That's my role. No more, no less. Didn't reset Wi-Fi router. Didn't refill the office printer paper. Didn't track package or help schedule meetings. Let callers ring endlessly while I was away from the desk. Why? It didn't even list that as part of my job description. And chaos ensued. Derek was the first to complain. My response? I'm just the receptionist. I let him take his own medicine. Then the CEO ended up calling me into his office to promote me to office coordinator. It happened, thanks to him. Simple matters, but has a big effect. Yeah, I would argue that going above and beyond your job description typically just gets taken for granted and doesn't pay dividends, but this is a rare case where it did. And, when you kind of pulled back the workload that you were doing, it was noticed, it was felt, and you got rewarded as a result. Anacron 101 replied, I heard of another receptionist who invented her role as office manager and had to work really hard so no one found out that she didn't do anything. Our next story is, just scrub harder. This happened years ago when I worked as a dishwasher / semi-janitor for a bakery. Essentially, my job description was just to clean. One day, someone spilled raspberry filling all over the wall underneath the hand washing station. My boss asked me to scrape off the excess and sanitize, so I did that. Unfortunately, the stain was left because raspberry filling is actually radioactive or something. She asked about the stain. I then explained to her that I could tell the filling had stained the paint, and if I scrubbed any harder, I would scrub the paint off the wall, and the wall was likely stained underneath as well. She told me to scrub harder, so I did. I scrubbed to my heart's content until the paint came off. Then I scrubbed the wall underneath for good measure. Again, raspberry filling is like nothing else. These fillings stained everything immediately. When she looked back at the area, she complained about the paint being ruined and told me I had scrubbed too hard. Freak you, Laura. Yeah, you can't have it both ways. You can't insist that they scrub harder, and then when they scrub harder and the paint comes off, you act like that person is at fault. You gotta own it. You gotta own it. This is on you, Laura. You suck. Cute Brooks replied, classic case of do exactly what they say, then get blamed for it. You gave her a fair warning. She wanted the paint gone. She got it. Raspberry filling 1, Laura 0. And OP replied to this, getting told I scrubbed too hard after I specifically stated why I didn't want to scrub too hard was the cherry on top of the evil raspberry filling. When I moved on to another job, I heard their new dishwasher didn't do half the crap I did. Good for him, to be honest. She's not paying enough for that crap. Our next story is, talk to the hand. I've commented about this. I think it fits here. In the late 80s, I was asked to work at my pharmacy job full-time during summer break from college. I was the only young full-time worker and the only male among a clique of mom to grandma-aged women, mostly working mother's hours. My half-hour lunch was supposed to start at noon, but for some reason my relief just wouldn't show up no matter how often I paged them. 15 minutes, a half hour, an hour, or more. It didn't bother me, so I didn't complain about it. That first Friday, I finally get to break a little after 1 p.m., and the store manager comes in and starts telling me she's had multiple complaints that I've been screwing up everyone's break schedule and how disappointed she is in me. I try to tell her that my relief is not showing up, and she actually does the hand thing where she just puts her hand in my face and says, starting next week, I want you back on the main register at 12:30 sharp. No excuses. So next Monday, I start paging my relief at 4:15. At 5:00, I call for second or backup register, who's surprised since there's only one customer. I tell her to open the second register. I close the main, lock my drawer in the office, and punch out right at noon sharp. About 10 minutes later, the store manager comes running into the break room in a panic, asking why the main register is closed. There's a line, and more importantly, why is the main register closed? And I go, on Friday you told me I had to be off the main register at noon sharp. No excuse it. And she goes, that's not what I said. And I respond, did you say starting next week I have to be back on the main register at 12:30 sharp? No excuses? And she says, yes, that's what I said. And I go, and is my break a half hour long? Can you please punch back in and take care of the line? I'll find your relief. My relief showed up at 5 to noon for the rest of the summer. Old Bat 4194 replied, "It looks like the person who was supposed to relieve you was taking advantage. Your SM should have found out just who was supposed to be your relief. When I was a cashier supervisor for a large store, I knew where my cashiers were for each break. I knew which cashier I assigned as relief for each till. If the breaks were running late, I would find out why. Then the cashier responsible would be held accountable. I would never have accused you of being responsible for messing up the relief system, since I would have already known who your relief was. It appears the other ladies were making it appear like you were not returning from your lunch on time. However, I would have asked whomever was supposed to relieve you what time they took over from you. Your SM doesn't appear to be keeping a close eye on staff's comings and goings." Our next story is, "Dress more appropriately for church." Sure, I'll follow the rule literally. A couple years ago, I joined a small but tight-knit church community. Everyone was pretty relaxed. People came in jeans, dresses, and even t-shirts sometimes, especially at youth services. No one was disrespectful, just comfortable. I usually wore long skirts or dress pants and nice tops. Nothing flashy and definitely nothing revealing. But apparently, that wasn't churchy enough for one particular elder, an older woman. After service one day, she pulled me aside and said, with that sweet fake smile, "Sweetheart, I just wanted to encourage you to dress a bit more appropriately. We should always look our best for the Lord." I was confused. I asked what exactly was inappropriate about my outfit. A long navy skirt, a tucked-in blouse, and flats. She said, "It's not bad, but, not quite holy attire. Maybe think about what you'd wear if Jesus was sitting in the front row." The next Sunday, I showed up in my most over-the-top church outfit. Full floor-length choir robe, white gloves, a white-brimmed hat with a fake bird and a little veil, Bible in hand, stockings, low heels, and pearls. I looked like I was either about to preach, get baptized, or time travel back to 1954. People stared. One usher asked if I was part of the clergy now. Someone whispered, "Is she in a play?" And bless her heart, the elder gave me a stunned little nod when I sat close to her and said, "You look very reverent today." "Thank you. I figured this is how Jesus would want me to show up." Next week, back to my casual outfit. Never got a comment again. Yeah, I would have just left the church, but I suppose being petty, that goes hand in hand with how some of these churches operate behind the scenes. Just saying. Sparky Collects 1650 replied, "My ex and I were getting ready for church one hot summer Sunday, and I came out in shorts, a nice polo shirt, and sandals. She said, 'You don't wear sandals to church,' and insisted I change into shoes. I told her, 'Jesus wore sandals to church.' Needless to say, I was comfortable that day." The Bearded Barry commented, "In college, my hair was shoulder length and I had a big beard. My aunt and uncle lived a couple hours from campus, so on some weekends I'd go up to their place in the mountains to get away from the stress. Before one visit, my uncle had been having some abdominal pain issues. Turned out to be appendicitis in a 75-year-old man of all things. I walked in and found him laying in pain on the couch. When I went to say hi, I was looking down at him and my head was silhouetted by a ceiling light, so all he saw was a dude with a beard and long hair. He looked at me and said, 'So, Jesus, do you have the sandals to go with that hair?' We both looked down to the Birkenstocks on my feet and had a good laugh." Our next story is, "Company has an asinine travel policy. Costs them extra. A few months ago, I had to travel for work. Some cost-saving measures had been implemented recently, and I was required to have a funding letter from the financial department so they could allocate funds appropriately, even though my travel was authorized by my supervisor and required for the company business. Okay, I'll jump through this hoop, whatever. I get a funding letter and travel a couple hours to my home away from home. Halfway through my trip, my work schedule opens up and I have a few days off, but I know I'll be working more the following week. Since I'm only a few hours from home, I decide to check out of my hotel, drive home to spend the weekend with my family, then drive back the following week when I actually have work to do. Saves the company paying a few days for a hotel room and per diem, and I get time with family. Win-win, right? Wrong. When I submit my travel claim to financial, it counts as 2 separate trips. The problem is I have one funding letter, which covers the dates of my travel, but doesn't cover 2 trips, even though both trips are inside the travel window in the funding letter. This blows up and takes about a month and a half to get sorted out, during which time I had to pay off my company credit card for the travel expenses incurred using my own funds. Eventually, the money was all properly allocated and I got reimbursed for my interest-free loan to the company, but I learned my lesson. Another trip comes up and I'm issued one funding letter. I drive up again and work for a few days. Sure enough, my schedule opens up and I have some days off. This time, instead of checking out of my hotel, I just leave, drive home, and now I'm sitting on my couch typing this while the company pays my per diem and pays for an empty hotel room. Pretty sure the bean counters will get a raise for their fine work. Cheers to them. Work smarter, not harder, as they say. This is brilliant, and you get a little bit more family time. Good, malicious compliance. Only Video replied, "That's funny. I had a similar situation a few years back. Emergency work site was only about an hour and a half from my home. Company paid for hotel and $35 a day per diem, and I told them I would just need the per diem and they could cancel the hotel as I had a baby and a tired wife not too far away and could commute while giving her a break each night. They said local staff does not get per diem. I would be there 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. with no time for anything but work. My travel would really make it 5:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. There was no changing their minds, so I said, okay, you're right. I'll stay here since that back and forth drive would be a lot. They were glad I came to my senses, so they paid for a hotel room for 3 weeks that sat empty, and I got my $35 per day so I could hit a drive-thru on my way to and from each day. The math is they spent over $6,000 because they didn't want to give me $700. Our next story is, CEO's assistant said it wasn't right I had a nicer chair than he did. Very mild one, bit wordy, with a not particularly satisfying payoff. A while back, my wife and I were buying our house after a few years of rental. There was a delay in the new house being ready, so we moved in with my mother for a few weeks. During that time, I stashed some stuff at work, including bringing in my chair, a very nice Herman Miller Aeron that I'd gotten secondhand. The office chairs were old, standard, serviceable, but not exactly nice. After a few days, I noticed that my chair would be in the conference room every morning. No problem, I just wheeled it back to my desk. I was working 8 to 4 to avoid traffic, so it was usually in first. The CEO, of about 120 people, would usually not arrive until about noon and take later meetings when most of the staff were away. After a few days, the chair kept ending up at his desk. Open plan, thankfully, so I just took it back every morning. I wasn't foolish enough to go into the CEO's office. He'd shoot me a dirty look every morning, but that was it. After a few more days of this back and forward, the CEO's assistant, who was a lovely person who I felt immense pity for, approached me and told me that the CEO didn't think it was appropriate that I had a nicer chair than him. People would think that my desk belonged to the CEO, and it was stressing her out having to basically fight for it every day on his behalf. I told her I understood completely and would stop fighting over it. I took it out of the office that lunchtime and reclaimed a normal office chair. The next day, she came over and asked me where the chair was. I said, with an incredibly straight face, that I thought since it wasn't appropriate, I just took it to my car. She had a super stunned look, but just kind of ran off. Since I was almost always first in, I always got parking near the building. Pretty much everyone got to walk past my car on the way into the office and see my chair in the boot for a few more weeks. However, given his cowardly nature, I never got approached about it again. To this day, I'm 100% certain they thought I was just going to give in and let him have my chair. Instead, I got the joy of telling everyone the honest truth about why my chair was in my car for weeks. Funny story, but the operative question is, why couldn't the boss just get their own chair, or perhaps even a nicer chair than the standard old office chairs? Why this particular chair? Hatix replied, if the guy had any sense, he'd have just done what my old IT director did. Hey, why is your chair so much better than everyone else's? I brought it from home. It's mine. Cool, good choice. Next day, he had a 980-pound office chair delivered. Our next story is Timeclock Compliance. I work at a manufacturing company. The closest time clock to the employee parking lot is down in the machine shop, and every day about 24 people can be seen standing around the clock, waiting for it to click over to 3:30 and they can punch out. But about a year ago, we got a new general manager. After she had been there for a couple of months, she decided that this would not be allowed, and a notice was posted stating that people may not congregate around the time clock anymore. At about the same time, there is a corporate-wide exercise campaign based around the Olympics, and many people downloaded an exercise app that tracked their daily steps, along with other things, for possible prizes and locational donors. Now, the downstairs machine shop is a large, open, roughly square space with a marked aisle running down the periphery of the floor. So, when the time clock edict came around, people still headed to the clock, but instead spent the time getting their daily steps in. By the end of the week, we had about 30 people spending at least 5 to 10 minutes of the shift circumambulating clockwise around the entire machining department, checking the clock each time they passed. After the GM saw this spectacle one day, I guess it reminded her too much of that scene in Midnight Express, and she reversed the clock edict. Funny thing, though, people still kept coming down to get their steps in for a few weeks afterward, until the contest was over. Yeah, low-key, this sounds kind of creepy. I think Boss Lady was definitely right to reverse the edict and, let them congregate. People want to get out of there. John Jackon replied, "The plant I worked at, the hourly employees would line up their lunch boxes down the aisle from the time clock to save their spot. Of course, they were there at 3:30 to watch the clock. Punching out was using badges. In the office, there is a different clock that used time cards. All the ladies would put their lip marks on the top of the card so they could grab the right card by the lipstick color." Our next story is, you want me to participate in the weekly all hands? No problem. I just saw an article about Mercedes-Benz allowing Teams calls with a camera to their vehicles, and it reminded me of this situation. Several years ago, I worked for a small solar company that was acquired by what's essentially the Walmart of solar. We went from weekly in-person meetings on a schedule that worked for both management and staff to daily check-ins, weekly department calls, and other unnecessary regional calls and meetings. What was initially 2 to 3 short meetings per week turned into around 10 45-minute to an hour meetings per week. My responsibilities were about 20% in the office, 80% fieldwork. Some of the locations I needed to get to were an hour plus away, and a lot of times I was crunched to get to 5 to 6 locations within the workday. For as long as I could, I would either skip a call if I was in the field, or I would listen and not participate so I was on the call, but could still take care of whatever tasks I needed to. I ended up getting reprimanded and told to just park and take the calls, but I needed to participate in all of them or I would be written up. So that's what I did. If a call was happening, I would find the closest parking lot, take the call, and participate. This company also scrutinized overtime and hours, so we couldn't work OT without approval. This meant if I didn't get something done, I would just head back to the office and reschedule it for the following day. My coworkers did the same, and our productivity dropped overall by about 60%. Within a month, our regional manager was in our office asking us what was going on, and we told her directly that we have a large region to cover and most of these calls are nonsense corporate feel-good BS. If they wanted productivity where it was before, they needed to cut the meetings because meetings don't improve metrics. Actually, being able to work does. They did cut our meetings, but it turned into a crap show when the big company fully took over. That office is now officially closed because while we had the second best metrics in the entire company, we were tired of the BS and we all quit, and they could not replicate our quality or quantity of installations in that office. Sometimes you just have to draw the line in the sand. No amount of pay is worth that level of BS. Get out of there, find a better job. Might have to take a pay cut in the interim, but at least you get away from that headache. Avid Learner Bot replied, "It's frustrating how meetings can drain productivity and morale, but it's encouraging to see people stand up for what they believe in rather than just endure nonsense." Just a girl in her job replied, "At my old job, there were 4 people in my position, in my office. The other 3 quit within a 6-week span for varying reasons. I ended up covering every project my office had, plus helping hire and train new people. In addition to the other responsibilities I had, I was a hybrid position. Everyone in my office and corporate realized I was swamped, so to help, I only had to attend absolutely critical meetings. My meetings went from about 10 to 15 hours a week down to about 1 hour per week. After about 3 months, the director of my office and the CEO of the company were talking to me and telling me how much they appreciated me and how they didn't believe the workload I was successfully managing, and they were in awe. I did not tell them by losing the meetings I had to attend. I gained so much more time to be productive, and even now, if you had me choose between an intense workload with no meetings and a medium workload with 25% of my time in meetings, I would choose the intense workload with no meetings without any hesitation. And OP replied to this: I don't think any meeting should be an hour long unless we're at the beginning of a project and we need to go over all the details. Most meetings can be an email, and if we need a meeting to work something out, please send me an agenda ahead of time so I can prepare and not waste time. Our next story is: Creepy Dean asks creepy request. IT complies. Around 2001 in Argentina, I did a network admin course. The guy that taught the course was also an admin in a university. Let's call him IT Prof. And he told us this story. The department of the university IT Prof worked for dealt with mostly philosophy and philosophy-related careers, and it was around 95% female students, mostly high school graduates, but also a lot of people that, once retired, started the career as a hobby. In Argentina, university can be free of charge. In Argentina, IDs are numbered and sequential. So, for instance, if an ID starts with 28 million, you can estimate what year that person was born in. There's only one caveat. Foreign-born people that have gained citizenship get a number that starts with something like 80 million. The dean, let's call him Creepy Dean, at that department was a 50 to 55-something old dude with, you guessed it, a pretty creepy behavior. IT Prof could access browsing history of every single person in the department, and let's just say his wasn't pretty nor university related. Creepy Dean taught a couple of mid-career courses. He was one of several professors that taught these courses. Every year, each university assigns the students to the courses they ask for and divides them between all available professors. Sometimes this is done by hand. Sometimes it's randomized somehow. This is handled by each department. In this case, it was done by a computer program that randomized everything, so each course had a wide array of different students. This program was something that IT Prof created, because prior to that, this was done manually. One day, Creepy Dean calls IT Prof and tells him, I want, in my courses, just female students, with ID starting at 35 million or more. Get it done. And remarked to IT Prof that his job was on the line if he didn't comply. Since 95% of the faculty was female, this is a creepy request, but Creepy Dean knew that it wouldn't be as notorious. He could always blame it on chance. And at that time, this behavior was not something that could have gotten Creepy Dean fired. But the university board members wouldn't be too happy about this behavior either. IT Prof understood that 35 million or more on the ID was for people that were roughly 21 to 22 years old or younger. Creepy Dean wanted some eye candy and who knows what else. But Creepy Dean just said female, 35 million or more. So IT Prof complied. He assigned all foreign female students, with ID starting 80 million, and all older than 65 to Creepy Dean courses. Creepy Dean was furious the first day of classes. He wanted IT Prof fired. IT Prof told him, I've complied with your request, even though it was weird and something that I'm sure the board members wouldn't be too happy to find out about. IT Prof told us Creepy Dean got dishonorably discharged as dean a couple months after this story. There were some speculations, but he never found out exactly why. First of all, I'm sure there are some lovely, beautiful 65-plus-year-old foreign women out there, so let's not make a slight at that, but yeah, I get what you're going for. And yeah, Mr. Creeper, what can you really say that hasn't already been said? Jashka E. commented, making unreasonable, data-related demands of a sysadmin and making threats to enforce compliance is probably as close to making a wish from a monkey's paw as you can reasonably get. And OP replied to this, people who have authority rarely realize that people below them can sometimes disable said authority. Our next story is flooding the monitor. A year ago, I got fired from a job as efficiency lead. It happened a week after I noted that I was going to become a father, but that's another aspect. The reason I was hired was to dig deeper into company issues, finding the root cause. My manager was thrilled to have an actual FBA on board. Cue her assistant manager. Since I needed to learn the ins and outs, she got me into spending 70% of my time into useless tracking that she needed for her glorious monthly pivot tables. The thing is that noting down of post-its, mails, and several other influx into a spreadsheet that got me some very much needed insight. Either, for example, the printers were moved every month from one site to the other, or there was a huge flaw. Some of those flaws would be considered huge flags for the equivalent of IRS. When I started tracking them, as my job was exactly that, the AM tried to block me from several internal data. Since the manager and her assistant were pretty close, I tried to get the actual department from said flaws in the loop. Less than a week later, the manager asked why I was snooping around other departments. Meanwhile, everyone I spoke to at other departments were more than helpful in gathering information, even speaking to counterparts at other sites. 2 days later, she notified me she asked IT for a full copy of my mailbox, against the law, and was not amused. Henceforth, I had to include her in every mail I sent and had to write down by the minute on every case file I was working on. The last one was the easiest malicious compliance. When I got a call, I noted it. Went to get a coffee, and I noted internal movements. Even someone sticking his head inside the door to say hi. She got an Excel sheet with about 600 lines a day, including a line after each try for filling out the sheet. After 3 days, she was furious and wasn't taking things serious. Of course I wasn't, but she didn't have to know. I asked her to email me on the specifics she wanted me to write down and asked for a route path on every project. With a, "you know what I want," she stormed off. I got an email from HR for a talk. Told them everything, including my notes on every meeting. They asked me to just set up a spreadsheet with a total per day on every project and mailed it to the manager, including the note that I needed the information her assistant had blocked me from. The including in the email part was fairly simple. It was about 10% of my total conversation. When the manager went on vacation, she said she liked the new way of working and told me to push on 3 main issues I laid out. And of course, the assistant took her chance to get into the high chair. The mails were not adequate, so I had to send her a full report on any conversation. It started innocent till I got to an old file with the signature of the assistant and several site managers. I started calling them and asked about the information listed. After about 5 phone calls and a small note mailed to the assistant, she stormed into the shared office, calling me a no-good golden retriever trying to find truffles and muck water. She demanded a full report on any coming call. Cue malicious compliance number 2. I started using voice-to-text software to make full transcripts on any call. Even a question about something like, "How's the new cleaning lady doing?" was fully written down. Imagine receiving an average of 4 hours a day of transcription. Because of the flooding, she missed the pattern about the €1,000,000 issue I was gently going towards. When the manager came back, the assistant told her I was harassing her. Even without a chance to give a reply, I received an official letter at my house about an inquiry. The inquiry was the manager, someone from HR, and someone from the European chair. To top it all off, the assistant manager had given the manager a list of confidential documents that I've stolen from her private laptop, including that old file sitting somewhere on the server. When they asked why I needed that file, I started pointing out that the file was pointing to a huge flaw concerning legal documents and payments, the exact thing I was hired for. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that I was going out the door within a few days, so I started rattling up the cage. I read my initial job description and the internal guidelines to the role. The 2 guys I was working with went into a frenzy to find any consequence from that error. The site managers were alerted. Accounting started making calculations. The last email that I received was probably sent too early. OP falsified several documents on the server to get manager and assistant manager into trouble. Any communication should be deleted by the end of the day. Needless to say, I had to pack my things. 3 months later, I met some guys from the company. Turned out the damage was done, but the cover-up was even better. The avalanche of people involved that quit was undeniable, and some departments involved had over 50% of workforce sitting at home due to mental issues. The duo still works there, sitting on a lie that can still cost the firm millions a year since they still haven't solved the issue. What a mess. Everybody loses here. Not much else to say. Goodness gracious. Our next story is, he came for a refund, so I gave him one. Years ago, when 2-year cell phone contracts were still a thing and you had to pay per text message, I worked at a Sprint store in a busy area in Michigan. We weren't a corporate store, which meant we didn't have access to billing or refunds. We were more there for repairs and sales. One day, this man comes in fuming about being charged 20 cents for a text that allegedly Sprint had sent. Probably a bill reminder. But I don't believe you were charged for text from the company. Anywho, I explained to the man that we aren't a corporate store, so I wouldn't even be able to access the bill to refund. And that was just unacceptable, and he starts screaming. Starts drilling into me about how I'm just a dumb kid and people my age, they love to text, but he's never going to, and how it's unfair he has to pay this charge. I just went to the corner store for a snack and paid cash, and I just threw my change in my pocket. I reached in my pocket, smiled at him, and pulled out a quarter. I said, "Here you go, with interest." I felt like a goddess. It was so petty, and his face, priceless. "This isn't the point." He slammed the quarter down and left. I hope he's having the day he deserves. Yeah, I understand money's money, but if you're moaning about a 20-cent charge, you're just someone that loves to complain about things for absolutely no reason. That is the point, not the fact that you turned down the quarter, although I would have taken that. BrianC81 replied, "I was in a similar position back then, for a competitor company store. Everything was mostly great in those years right before iPhone, except for boomers. We would explain text messaging as the service it was, and suggest whatever texting plan was appropriate. If the plan you choose is too high or low after the first couple of months, I'll make an account note to backdate the right one." Screams in boomer about the kids and their texting. Okay, in that case, I can just add a note that you won't be using messaging, so no monthly fee. Q Boomer, 45 days later, coming in red-faced to scream about why they're being billed for every single one of the 4,694 text messages they sent. Our next story is, when the big company doesn't trust employees. Bored of the repetitive posts, maybe from bots, I have a different story about economic incentives. I used to work for a multinational that allowed to fly business class for intercontinental client trips. It must have been some accountant worrying that employees could trade the ticket in, fly coach, and pocket the money, because the policy stated that the boarding passes needed to be included in the expense report. Since people hated to spend 6 to 10K USD on a ticket and get reimbursed a month later once they could produce boarding passes, they all bought their tickets at the last minute, thus paying 10 to 15K. This is the economic lesson. People respond to incentives. So the company ended up overpaying for plane tickets because it didn't trust the employees. The policy changed when people started using electronic boarding passes and forgot to ask for paper ones. Genius bean counters must have found significant savings in the average flight costs, but probably they were too dumb to figure it out. Coder Joe 1 replied, "Yep, I worked for a company with the same policy, and they mysteriously dropped it for everyone but execs a few months later." New Boss Jerome replied, "My ex-wife's company had a rule that if the total flight time was greater than 8 hours, you could fly business. Someone in accounting did a study showing how much money they could save, so the rule was amended to department heads and above. My ex and her coworkers complied maliciously. Can't take business class and arrive a little less haggard? Then we'll only travel during business hours. 24-hour flight back from Japan? I'll need 2 days to recover. We're salaried. No need to take PTO." The policy was later revised to cover international travel. Our next story is, he doesn't care. He wants the report sent on Friday. End of discussion. I finally have one. I sent 2 reports to our biggest client every week. One I send Tuesday and again on Friday. This is the open order report. Every order we're currently fulfilling. The second I send on Monday. It's the report for what orders we've shipped the previous week. This gives the customer a full image of open and closed orders. Mind you, I specifically requested that the tool to generate the second report be created. Sending the report and the creation of the tool used to send it were both my idea. In my one-to-one on the 18th, I explained to my manager that I need to send the second report on Monday because the information's not updated in our software in a timely manner on Friday. So sending it on the Friday of the following week ensures everything is current. The tool has an option to select which dates are reflected in the report. So today, Monday, 6/30, I would select the dates for last week, 6/23 to 6/27. My manager misunderstood and thought that if I sent the report on Monday, it would include that Monday and 4 days of the previous week, Tuesday to Friday. He sent me an email on the 26th saying he did not like this solution and found it confusing. He said, effective immediately, we would need to adjust my hours to extend when billing is complete, which is around 4:30 p.m. I work till 4. I absolutely don't mind staying to do the job I'm paid for, but I knew that due to the delay in updating, the shipping report would not be current. I also knew it would reflect 5 days of the same week and not 1 day of the current week and 4 days of the previous week. I went to his office to clear this up, and I said 2 words before he interrupted me in a raised voice. I don't care. I want the report sent on Friday. I immediately said, okay, manager, and went to leave, but he continued going off. I said something else, and he shut me down again. You need to send the report on Friday. End of discussion. Okay, manager. Cue malicious compliance. The next day, I stay later, refreshing the report that I know is not going to update. I generate it and see that Friday shipments are missing. I send it as instructed and leave. Shortly after, he emails saying the report is not complete and I need to send one Monday morning. I don't work on the weekend, so I just saw it this morning. I tell him that I have one tool to get this done, and there's a delay in the system, and tell him this is why I suggested sending on Mondays. I ask him if there's another tool or method I'm unaware of. I tell him the invoicing report and the shipping report don't match. He says, that's the problem. You sent the report without looking at it. I let him know I did look at it, but I did what I was instructed to do. Now we look even more unorganized and inconsistent to our biggest customer. He says the information should be available on Fridays, and he asked a higher-up for details on when the report updates. That higher-up said that the repost doesn't update until 4:30 p.m. to 5:15 p.m., when everyone is gone. Most recent correspondence? FYI, we can talk about when we want to send the report. Oh. Yeah, this isn't too hard to understand. I don't know. I think boss is just on a power trip and wants to have final say in these decisions. But could have avoided that. Totally could have. Mick Crotch replies, when this happens, just send a CYA email to him and CC his immediate boss. As per our previous discussion, I'll start sending the XYZ report at the close of business on Friday. Don't add any justifications, counter-arguments, reasoning, or excuses. Just send the sentence acknowledging the course of action. Don't say, I agree to, just that you'll start doing the action they want. Our next story is, what's your best, you want me to follow the rules exactly? Fine. Story. My dad kept telling me to, quote, just follow the speed limit exactly, after I get a speeding ticket. So I did. I drove 25 mph in the 25 mph school zone, 35 mph in the 35 mph residential area, and 55 mph on the highway. He was running late for his job interview when I was driving him there. We hit every single slow zone during rush hour. He missed the interview by 20 minutes. He never mentioned the speed limit thing again. Why are you, as a new driver, driving your dad to a job interview? I don't know. I guess there's a story within the story there, but that's just kind of weird. Okay, everybody, that is all the time we got for today. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and comment down below. And if you want to check out any of our other videos, click the video on the right. I got nothing else for you. Get out of here. I will see you all next time.